Chef Ken back. We just finished trimming up a tenderloin, a filet, and I just thinking about it. I'm saying what I want anybody and everybody out there who's listening is don't be afraid to do that. If you had bought that filet and did nothing except take the cryovac. You know what the cryovac is? The cryovac is that vacuum seal that will actually age meat up to say 4 weeks. It'll make it tenderize it because there's enzymes in there that are working at that meat. But that keeps it fresh. You take that out, some of that juice, water, and a little bit of blood comes out. But if you were to just open it and do nothing more than cut steaks, that's basically what the butchers are doing today. So you're saving yourself at least 30% over what it would cost to have a butcher do it. So just do it. If you're afraid of silver skinning, taking off silver skin, not understanding where the fat is or this is or that is, just buy it and cut it. It'll work. Okay, these are primal cuts. So when I started in the business, ribs didn't come boneless. You had to take the bones out. The fillets came on the short loin with the New York sirloin. You had to take it off. But now we get all these primal cuts, they're called now. It's been 50 years. More they come, and this is a ribeye, which, gosh, I can't remember. This is a 111, I guess, the number. Yeah, the primal cuts come, and they all have numbers. They don't mean anything to you, probably. In the business, they do. But in any event, you can get this you can get a rib with the bones sticking all the way out where you cut the short ribs off, because the short ribs come off of here. These are the bones. Short ribs are over here, right? Short ribs now, which used to be almost a throwaway piece of meat, I saw for $9, $10 a pound for short ribs. 50% fat and bones, $10. So that's $20 a pound for that meat. And that meat you're going to cook a long time and it shrinks. You're going to end up, it's going to cost you $25 a pound just for meat for short ribs. The best cooking piece of meat though. Anyway, so they'd come in all different. We'd have the 109, which was the oven ready. And what happens at the top of this is there's another piece of meat on top of here, right around here. It's called a decal. Very tough piece of meat. So what would happen is if you try to roast it with that on top, this part would come out medium rare, and this part would be raw as can be, because that tough meat, the heat can't get through it. So they decided what we're going to do is we're going to open this up. There's a big fat cap on it. You open the fat cap up, take the decal off, and then they put the fat back on. That's why you always see a prime rib roast tied. And they tied that fat on. You know why they tied the fat on? Because 100 years ago, this meat had no fat in it. It was very dry. So they say, we need all that fat on here to cook it, especially the French. The French are the ones that decided this. Today, you don't need that. This is delicious just the way it is. You don't need an inch of fat on top with just grease going all over the place. Everyone I ever cooked had an inch of fat on top. Why? All right, so now you get them this way with the tail on. You can get them with the tail off. You'll see them in the store, just a round kind of ribeye. Obviously, the more of that you cut off, the more expensive it is. But again, like the filet, if you just took this away, I have not touched this, and just cut steaks. This is 20 pounds. So 20 pounds, if you were, you can get 20, 1 pound, a 1 pound ribeye steak. I couldn't eat a 1 pound. You can get 20 out of here. It's I don't care if this was $120 or something. You get 20 steaks out of it. It's only $6, $7 a steak. And what do you pay for a 1 pound ribeye in a restaurant? It's going to cost you $100. So you're going to save money, and you've got to save money today. But we're going to trim this a little bit just to show you. Again, going back over here, if I flip this over, I will flip it over, but 7 ribs. Remember, standing rib roast has 7 ribs. And what we would do is we would roast this with the bones and everything, and we'd stand it up, and we'd have a little rod that would hold it up, and it would go like this, and we'd carve it for people. And then it got to ribeyes where you just carve it like this. But there's 7 ribs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ribs that have been boned out of this. Same thing on here. But what we're going to start with, a little of that silver skin. Just like the New York sirloin and a little bit like the filet, across this head, across the top, there's some silver skin. So what can happen to this is when you cut a steak out of this and you cook this steak, that piece of silver skin there can curl up and your steak will go and it'd be all wonky. So we don't take a lot of it off because a lot of this is very soft. as opposed to the filet, which is tougher. This is pretty soft silver skin. It's actually edible. You wouldn't have trouble eating this. But I like to get a little bit of it off anyway. My father-in-law, great man, my father-in-law, but he wanted the more fat on a prime rib. He loved to go out for a prime rib. He said, I want the fattiest piece you have. And he made sure he got like a big chunk of meat with a big chunk of fat as he ate. So I'm just going to give it a little bit here. It doesn't need, you don't need to take this off, but it's nice. It's a little bit of silver skin in there, but that was nothing. That was no work. I'm not tired. All right, as you come down on this, there's a part here you can feel it's hard because it's thick fat. So I'm going to take some of that fat off. You don't need it all here. Now, if I cut through and hit the meat, it's all right. Everybody makes mistakes. I could tell you when I go through the supermarket and look at the meats, I'm saying, well, that butcher screwed up on that one. And they don't take the time to do a nice job anymore. But this is where it's thickest, right in here. You can leave it in. All right, if you're grilling this on a charbroiler and you leave this in, it'll make a fire, which is good and bad, because this much fat on top of your steaks, you've got 3 or 4 or 5 steaks on there with this much fat on each, that fire can get away from you. You don't need that all. So you cut that off. Now, of course, I'm leaving the tail on. So essentially, I'm done here. This is it. So all I'm going to do, now get back to that filet mignon. I don't think it took me 5 minutes to trim that filet. And you can do it in 5 minutes too. So it's no effort. But what you're getting out of it is great. And this is up to you. You be your own butcher. You say, I want to get this. I don't like, there's too much fat there. All right. And you know what? Like I said, if you make a mistake and you cut into that eye of that meat, just stop. That's really all I'm going to take off. So let me see if I can see how much I took off. So 20 pounds. I took off almost 2 pounds. So we got 18 pounds of meat here. So I could have 18 1-pound steaks out of this. Now I'm going to turn over just in case something's here that I don't like. There's a few loose pieces you can take off. They're going to fall off on the grill anyway. But this is really good for brochettes or stir fry or whatever. Everything else here is fine. There's a little silver skin between these rib bones, which is edible. It's fine. It's chewable. It's not tough. All right, and then we're going to get back to this tail. I'm not going to take the tail off. But if I wanted to, you know, maybe I will. I'm going to take the tail off of this one. Because the tail, it has a nice piece of meat on it, but it's just as nice to, just as good to take it off and cut it up for something else. And then when you cook your steak, it's just steak, no tail. All right, so I got this off, but I can trim this up later and get something out of that. Now I can start cutting steaks. All right, cutting steaks. One important thing about cutting meat. When you're cutting bread, tiny little sawing strokes. When you're cutting meat, you take long, broad strokes, never letting up. If you go like this, you're going to end up with little slices in the meat. It's going to look real ugly. All right, I'm going to take a little bit off of this to square it up a tiny bit. I got 2 dogs here at my feet. I could throw this down. They'd be very happy. All right, let me get the scale ready so I can see what size I'm cutting. Now I'm going to have to ask my daughter, you want to have one steak for the 2 of you or individual steaks?
Individual.
Okay, that's tough because it's so big. They're not going to be real thick. That's the problem.
The thicker one.
If I cut individual steaks here at 12 ounces, they're going to be thin, which is fine. But then you put them in the grill, they're done. They're not that charred. If I do cut them bigger, like let's say,
like that.
Whoa,
Oh
my God, that's huge. That's 1 pound 9 ounces, pound and a half. If I pound and a half is how many ounces? 24, 2 12-ounce steaks right here. That's why I said if you had 2 12-ounce steaks, how much thinner would that be? This way you do the same thing and then you slice them.
Yeah, do them like that.
Now it's a nice clean cut. I'm not bringing the knife back up at all. 1 pound, 8 ounces on the money. There's a nice fat piece on there. That's for your flame. That gives you your flame, right? You can trim it a little if you want, but that's beautiful. Now just look at that. Just look at that. Oh my God. Oh my God. Now I need a bigger knife. She doesn't have a real big butcher knife. A bigger butcher knife would cut through this much faster. This one's a little too big, I think. You'll find the meat gets a little higher and thicker as you go. So this one's probably, yeah, this is 1 pound, 11 ounces. That's a little bigger. This is what you call a butcher's trimming. They trim them here so that when you look at it, you don't see as much fat, but there's still just as much here. I just cut that one a little big because I'm out of practice. How's that? That a good excuse? All right, now ribeye. Look what happens. You're starting at this end. This is basically where the New York sirloin is. So the next piece here is a New York sirloin steak. Now we come to the ribeye. As we come through, we start getting this, which is really beautiful. Some people also call this Sedeco, but this is very tender and just delicious. Now what happens with the rib is you get this fat in between. That's a good thing. When I used to sell so many prime ribs, and you'd sell a piece of this like to somebody, and they'd send it back, say it's all full of fat. Tell the chef I don't want it, it's full of fat. I said, well, I can't get that fat out of there without tearing this piece of meat apart. You need to cut around it. You need to do some work. Sorry. You know, it's the way the animal is created. But and the more you get through it, the more you're going to find there's going to be more and more of that. Now, see the difference? More and more fat, bigger and bigger. This is what my father-in-law would love. He said, give me that piece. He said, I want that. And a lot of people will complain about it. They'll say, it's just too fatty. I said, you order prime rib. You don't want fat, order filet mignon. Okay. I think we'll take a break now and work on the other one. But nothing new is going to happen there. This is it for ribeye. Again, don't be afraid. Just do it. This one over here, I could cut through it without trimming it. It would come out just as nice. You can cut through it like I told you on New York sirloin. You can cut through them just like this, and then individually cut the fat off if you don't like working on the whole thing. But that's it. Main point is do it. So you save money, and you learn something, and you really end up with a nice product. Now we've got to start talking about how we cook these things, and we can talk about how to get culinary jazz involved. We don't just follow a recipe. We actually create something. We'll be back to do something like that. Thanks so much.